everyone, Chandler here, slingshotfutures.com, and welcome to the daily market outlook for the futures markets for trading on 2/10 of 17 on good old Friday. Now, lots of volatility today and movement all over the place. Feels great to have that volatility back in the market. I can't say enough how slow the beginning of this week has been, and today it feels like the doors finally open, maybe just a little bit, to get some of that volatility back. Now, before we go jumping into the charts, as always, make sure to swing on over to slingshotfutures.com, scroll down to the bottom here, click on the Join the Daily Outlook newsletter that will get you signed up on our mailing list so that you will never miss when one of these comes out. And along with that, always good idea to make sure to check the blog every morning. We post our morning levels at the bottom, as well as every video that we post on YouTube also gets linked on here. So that way you'll have access to all of those in the morning prep levels and all the major levels of support and resistance we're watching that day, as well as just a market psychological recap so we can see what happened. Now, digging into the markets, we have the FGBL up first. And you'll notice I have circled up here massive block selling at monthly resistance. And that happened to be a huge clue. Looking at this move higher, we knew that it was going to be a range. We had a move up, a move down, failure, failure, and then we're starting to grind back up. We're very likely going to find sellers above, assuming that this is going to be an area of resistance, right? Now, looking at the tape, looking at the order flow coming in, huge amount of monthly contracts coming in, or rather just a huge amount of contracts rather coming in at that monthly resistance. And as soon as that hit, that thing just tanked to the downside all the way back lower to, you guessed it, new lows. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky because where are we? Well, we're technically at the bottom of a range, right? This is an area that buyers are going to want to try to come in at to force the market back up. The big issue here that we have is this is a fairly strong move down, kind of like what we saw here. Big move up, good continuation. Either they're going to get decimated off of the lows, in this case up, or we're going to go into a little bit of a range first before catching that bullish momentum. The main reason I say that is because just simply this is a strong move down. We have a nice bearish channel. The bears own the markets at the moment. The buyers can't even seem to get above the moving average for much longer than a candle or two before they're slapped right back down again. So paying attention to both sides of the market, we know that we're low in a range and we're probably going to end up buying sooner than later. But all things considered, yeah, we might need to stick on the sell side for a little bit longer until we see the buyers show up to the party. Over on gold, also a big collapse off of the highs, massive drop lower after they trapped the top of that range, and same thing, big move down. Now, this move down, a lot of the markets moved during this period of time, and I think there was some news from President Trump talking about taxes or something like that, and all of the markets kind of got shaken up by it. In gold's case, we had a drop of $1, over $1 to the downside, and $10 in gold's case. 105 ticks, I believe, was the initial drop. So with that amount of bearishness, it's very likely that the sellers are going to want to continue, right? Any hopes that the buyers have of going against that kind of movement is going to get slapped right back down again. Even if it takes a little longer, it's probably going to get slapped right back down again. Now, the overall momentum that we have here, we can see that we're starting to transition into a little bit of a range. The buyers are buying lows, and we're not really getting big lows anymore. You can see that the buyers probably were able to buy under here, and they were able to make a good return. Sellers are selling above, and they were able to make a good return as well. Buyers buying below, they're able to at least attempt to get that return made. So we're seeing profitability on both sides of the market, and generally what that means is we're going to transition into a little bit of a range. Now, the range looks pretty sturdy inside here, probably going to be somewhere inside this area, maybe a little bit lower. One thing that I would like to see is a potential failure through the bottom, a cycle back up towards the highs to retest that earlier breakout point. Huge amount of inventory got put in. They missed the test here, so if they can come back, that might be a nice area for support and resistance, either a major sell zone or, if they can break above it, a huge buy zone to turn the market back around. So very interesting scenario that we have here, and arguably we can trade both sides of it, so looking to buy low and sell high with a slight emphasis on selling just with the overall bearish trend. Over on the T-notes, the major market mover, right? The ultra bonds, not really, kind of being facetious there. Big movement to the downside, but all things considered, relatively back and forth. And every time we seem to find a good move, we end up going range bound for several hours. Get a good move, and we go range bound for several hours. So it's kind of like a migrating range. Now, that said, the bears still own the market. That's pretty obvious. And, you could even show a possible massive bear channel working its way lower. They tried working their way through the bottom, and all they managed to do was possibly maybe extend it a little bit. That's about it though. So a lot of bearishness working its way lower, and we could be looking for possible middle of the channel sort of resistance. You can see that area held very nicely on both support and resistance. Now, the fact that we're inside this range, one level that we have to keep an eye on is this support turned into resistance. This level seems to be an area of interest for sure, and that's going to be at 162.0506 or so. Now, the big area that I would really like to see is the market to come back to retest that original range bottom to see if the sellers want to stack in and try to drive the market back down. That would also coincide with a possible top of the channel here. So if we can get everything lining up in the same place, you may have a nice selling opportunity up here to drive the market back down. Now, if the buyers do continue going higher, they could manage to get a slightly larger channel working its way up. At the moment, that channel doesn't look so great, right? Especially with this lower high. It may just be that the sellers pile drive in for one more blast to the downside to kick it off. Now, if that is the case, chances are we should see a trap above that 162.06 area beforehand, and that would be a beautiful area for potential aggressive selling for that drive back down to a new low. So either way, I'm looking to sell, but preferably at a better price. On crude oil, nice little bullish move today. And I mean, in all honesty, the bullishness kind of subsided shortly after the open. We had a nice run up in the morning session, went a little range bound, broke up again. When the sellers tried to take back over, all they managed to do was trap that low point of the spiking channel from earlier and just rocket ship their way right back up towards the highs. Now, we did find a huge amount of selling pressure up here around the 53.20 area, and that location played an integral part in the way that the market moved. It pushed up, it hit all of those big block orders, a lot of buyers taking profit, new sellers coming into the market, and it shoved the market back down again. And that's where we start seeing the market transitioning into a range. We can see this low area, pretty obvious support and resistance, nice areas of resistance in here, turned into support, etc. And also on the highs, we put in a ton of inventory with those massive orders coming in between 53.21 down to 16. So we have two big areas that we need to keep our eyes on for, just a little bit of bouncing one way or another. Another area coming into play, 52.99, right around that 53 mark, and we can see that also acted as a big support and resistance level. So as long as we're fiddling around with these areas, got to be a little bit careful. There's not a ton of room for the markets to move inside here. And a lot of times when the market coils up that tightly, you end up getting another breakout. So right now we're looking like we're transitioning into a range. This could just be one huge wedge as well. Looking for support and resistance. Inventory above at 21 down to 16. Small support and resistance at 52.99 as well as 52.80s. And we're probably going to have to play all of those levels given how shallow of movement we're getting. Over on the NASDAQ, rocket ship of a day on the indices. The NASDAQ, not so much. Some of the other markets look a lot more bullish. The NASDAQ is slightly more range bound. We can see that we are trying to put in a possible top to bottom channel, drawing off the highs, and we're finding support off of that channel low. One big thing that we are seeing is a lack of coming down into inventory. They tried and they missed it. And they tried again and they missed it by a little bit more. This is where that buy move was stopped for a good half hour to an hour before they finally were able to break back above it. So that area is where we're looking to see if the buyers want to defend it again. If we break out of it and they pull back, do they want to hold that area once again, or are they going to have a little bit of trouble? This top to bottom channel that we have drawn up here is showing that support coming in off of the lows, and that's something to pay attention to. But if we can get a break down into this 52.04 to 52.0675 area, it'd be a nice spot to look for buying pressure to attempt to run back up towards the highs. Given how weak this last high is, it may not make it back to a high. We may find, that it only goes about 75% of the way, and that does occur sometimes when you have this weak of a high into a top to bottom channel. So overall, looking to be a buyer here, preferably at a better price, and not necessarily looking for a new high, but it is in the cards for at least the buyers to give it a shot. And then we have the S&P, very strong bullishness. This looks much more bullish than we saw on the NASDAQ, and kind of a similar situation. With this big run higher, we have a top to bottom channel, but the lows didn't really hold as well as we've seen so far on the NASDAQ. It appears as though they want to try to pull back into the bottom area before that finalized high. Now you'll notice once they made it back to the high, it was a huge breakout candle, absolutely no follow through. All of the buyers started exiting and turned into sellers, and that caused the market to shove its way right back down. So basically what that tells us is the buyers don't want to buy up here anymore. They're not interested in buying high. They were able to get away with it pretty much all morning, but not so much at the end of the day. So what I'm looking for is a pullback. I just don't want to buy this high. It's obvious that none of the buyers do, given this correction lower. So getting a pullback into inventory around 2302.75 to 2302.25, maybe even a little bit further down into monthly support at 99.5, also around that big 2300 level, could be a really nice area of interest to find more buying pressure once again. So looking for a buy, just at a better price. Now, the overall movement, tomorrow we do have some news, not for the U.S. session, though. We have the British pound coming out at 4:30 Eastern in the morning with the manufacturing production, as well as the Canadian dollar at 8:30 Eastern for the employment change, but no big U.S. news at the moment. Now, that said, for me, going into a Friday, no news. It's been really quiet all week until today. I'm really hoping that lack of news means that it's kind of opening the door for the markets to still continue this movement that we're getting. Chances are the indices will probably be more range bound tomorrow, just given the big explosion that they had today in terms of the upside momentum. So probably a range more so tomorrow on the indices, but all the other markets still have a chance to keep this train going. So fingers crossed, we're hoping. I'm loving this new volatility coming back in the markets in the beginning part of February here, and I'm really hoping it continues. So that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you found it well. Hopefully you did some good trading today. If you didn't, always good to review your trades and figure out what you can do better for next time. That's why we have a psychology video every single day. That's what we're doing in all of those. As always, make a plan, trade the plan, follow those rules, and you will do A-okay. Until tomorrow, we will see everyone later.